The crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel ballroom cast a golden glow over the hundreds of guests as the officiant began the vows. My heart hammered against my ribs when I rose from my seat in the back row, Gabriel's steady hand on my shoulder, and said the words that would change everything. "I object." All heads turned, and my father's face drained of color as he recognized his gay son standing there after 10 years of silence. Richard Harrington, the self-made billionaire whose tech empire spanned continents, stood frozen at the altar beside his much younger bride-to-be, Elena Voss. The room, filled with New York's elite, Wall Street titans, media moguls, and old-money families, erupted in whispers that grew into a low roar. Security guards in black suits started moving toward us, but I held my ground, Gabriel right beside me, his calm presence the only thing keeping my knees from buckling. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during the long flight from San Francisco, yet nothing prepared me for the raw shock in my father's eyes. "Owen," he finally managed, his voice cracking over the microphone. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped forward, the aisle feeling endless under the weight of every stare. Gabriel squeezed my hand once, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. At 28, I looked nothing like the scared teenager he had thrown out of our Connecticut mansion. My shoulders had filled out from years of early morning runs along the Embarcadero, my dark hair was cut short and professional, and the charcoal suit I wore had been tailored in a small shop in the Mission District, paid for with my own salary as a corporate attorney. Gabriel, 30 and steady as ever, wore a navy blazer that matched his warm brown eyes. His curly hair was tamed for the occasion, but the gentle smile he gave me was the same one that had saved me on the worst nights. "I came because you invited the whole family, Dad," I said, loud enough for the microphones to carry. "And I am still family, even after you told me never to come back when I was 18. The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw my Aunt Clara clutch her pearls, my cousin Marcus turn pale. Elena's perfectly painted lips parted in confusion. My father's new security chief, a burly man named Torres, reached us first. "Sir, you need to leave. This is a private event." Gabriel stepped slightly in front of me, his voice polite but firm. "We're not here to cause a scene. Owen just wants 5 minutes of honesty." Honesty. That single word had cost me everything once. At 18, I had sat in my father's home office, hands shaking, and told him the truth. I was gay. His response had been ice cold. "This family has a legacy. You will not ruin it." The next morning my credit cards were canceled, my college tuition pulled, and a one-way bus ticket to anywhere but Connecticut shoved into my hand. I had hitchhiked to New York, slept on friends' couches, and clawed my way through community college, and then law school on scholarships and night shifts at a coffee shop. Gabriel had entered my life 3 years later, a graphic designer who volunteered at the same LGBTQ youth center where I mentored teens. He had listened without judgment when I finally spoke about the father who chose reputation over his only son. Now, standing in this ballroom that smelled of expensive roses and fear, I felt every year of that pain rise to the surface. "You built an empire on innovation, Dad," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "But you couldn't accept the truth about your own son. I'm not here to ruin your wedding. I'm here because I finally stopped hiding. And because I wanted you to meet the man I love before you walk down another aisle pretending everything is perfect." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena looked between us, her bouquet trembling. A few guests pulled out phones, already recording. My father's jaw tightened the way it used to when board meetings went south. "Get them out," he ordered quietly. Torres grabbed my arm. Gabriel moved faster, placing himself between us. "Touch him again and we'll have a lawsuit before the cake is cut." The threat was soft, but the room heard it. I had never been prouder of the quiet strength he had taught me. We were escorted to the marble lobby, the heavy doors closing behind us with a finality that echoed my childhood. Outside, the September evening air in Manhattan was crisp, the city lights glittering like distant stars. Gabriel turned to me, cupping my face with both hands. "You did it, Owen. You spoke your truth in the one place he couldn't ignore. I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the ache of 10 lost years. He looked at me like I was a stranger. You're not, Gabriel said, pulling me into a hug right there on the sidewalk while taxis honked past. You're the man who built a life without him. And you have me. We walked toward the subway, hands linked, the weight of what I had just done settling around us like a new coat. I had no idea what would come next. Lawsuits, tabloid headlines, or maybe, just maybe, a crack in the wall my father had built. But for the first time in a decade, I wasn't running from who I was. I was walking toward it with Gabriel beside me. The subway ride back to our small apartment in Brooklyn felt surreal after the plaza chaos. Gabriel kept his arm around my shoulders the whole way, his thumb tracing slow circles on my sleeve. I stared at our reflection in the dark window. Two men who had chosen each other when the world offered every reason not to. By the time we climbed the 4 flights to our walk-up, the reality of what I had done began to sink in like cold rain. I had publicly claimed my identity in front of the one man whose approval I had once craved more than air. Inside, the apartment smelled of the rosemary plant Gabriel tended on the windowsill. He poured us both glasses of red wine and sat on the worn leather couch we had rescued from a curb last summer. "Talk to me," he said simply. I sank down beside him, the words spilling out in a rush. I told him about the morning I came out to my father, the way Richard had stared at the family portrait on his desk as if it had already been ruined. He said loving another man made me weak, that it would destroy the company image he had spent 30 years building. Then he wrote me a check for $10,000 and told me to disappear. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his dark eyes steady. He had heard pieces of the story before, but never all at once like this. When I finished, he set his glass down and pulled me close. "You survived that, Owen. You graduated top of your class, passed the bar on the first try, and landed a job at one of the most respected firms in San Francisco. None of that was weakness." I nodded, but the old doubt crept in. What if I just made everything worse? The press will have a field day. Billionaire's gay son crashes wedding. My aunts will call. My cousins will text. And Elena. She didn't even know I existed. Gabriel smiled softly. Then we face it together. The way we faced my parents when I brought you home to Seattle for Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Remember how my dad grilled you about football for 2 hours before he finally admitted he liked you? I laughed despite everything, the memory warming me. Gabriel's family had been the opposite of mine, loud, affectionate, and accepting from the first awkward dinner. His mother still sent us care packages with homemade tamales every Christmas. Their love had shown me what family could look like when shame wasn't part of the recipe. That night we lay in bed, the city noise filtering through the open window. Gabriel traced the scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident my father had once joked made me look tough enough for business. "You don't need his validation anymore," he whispered. "But if he reaches out, I'll be right here." The next morning my phone exploded. Missed calls from unknown numbers, texts from distant relatives, and one terse message from my father's assistant. "Mr. Harrington requests a meeting at his office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Alone. I stared at the screen until Gabriel gently took the phone from my hand. "You don't have to go," he said, but I knew I did. 10 years of silence demanded an ending, even if it hurt. Gabriel kissed my forehead and made coffee while I rehearsed what I would say. By the time we left for work, him to his design studio downtown, me to the law firm in Midtown, I felt the first stirrings of something new. Not fear, but resolve. The meeting at Harrington Tower was exactly as intimidating as I remembered. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and my father behind a desk the size of a small yacht. He didn't stand when I entered. "Sit," he ordered. I sat. For a long minute neither of us spoke. Then he slid a folder across the polished wood. "Non-disclosure agreement. Sign it and we can discuss damage control." I didn't touch it. I'm not here for damage control, Dad. I'm here because I'm tired of being your secret. His eyes narrowed. You think this is about you? Elena's family is old money. The merger depends on this marriage looking perfect. And now the tabloids are calling it the gay interruption. The word landed like a slap. I stood up slowly. I didn't interrupt your happiness. I interrupted your lie. The same lie you forced me to live with for 18 years. My voice cracked, but I kept going. I loved you enough to try to be straight. I dated girls in high school to make you proud. But love isn't something you can fake. For the first time in a decade, I saw something flicker in his expression. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. You have no idea what it takes to run an empire, he said quietly. And you have no idea what it takes to build a life without one, I replied. I left the folder on his desk and walked out. That evening Gabriel met me at our favorite rooftop bar in Brooklyn. We watched the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, the same view we had shared on our first official date. How did it go? He asked. Same old story, I said. But as I leaned into his side, feeling the solid warmth of him, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting for my father's apology anymore. I was writing my own ending. Weeks blurred into a tense rhythm of work and waiting. The tabloids had moved on to the next scandal, but the damage lingered in quiet ways. My law firm partners received curious calls. Gabriel's biggest client suddenly wanted to reassess the campaign. We leaned on each other harder than ever, cooking simple dinners in our tiny kitchen and talking late into the night about everything except my father. One Friday, Gabriel surprised me with tickets to a small gallery opening in Chelsea. The artist was a friend of his from art school, and the theme was hidden selves. As we wandered through the bright white space, I stopped in front of a large canvas. Two silhouettes holding hands against a stormy sky, one figure reaching toward light. It reminded me so much of us that I bought it on the spot. Gabriel laughed softly. You're turning into a romantic. I learned from the best, I said, kissing his cheek right there in the gallery. A few people glanced over, but no one stared. In San Francisco, we had grown used to this freedom. New York still felt like walking a tightrope sometimes. On the subway home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Owen, it's Clara. Your aunt. Your father isn't well. Heart issues. He won't ask, but he needs to see you. I showed Gabriel the message. His brow furrowed. What do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to delete it. The other part remembered the man who had taught me to ride a bike in the driveway of our old house, who had once bragged to his golf buddies about my straight-A report cards. I'll go, I said finally. But you're coming with me. We drove up to Connecticut the next weekend. The mansion looked exactly as I remembered. Sprawling stone and manicured lawns. Yet it felt smaller somehow. Aunt Clara met us at the door, her eyes red. He's in the study, she whispered. Be gentle. My father sat by the window, a blanket over his knees despite the warm October day. He looked thinner, the lines around his eyes deeper. When he saw Gabriel beside me, his mouth tightened, but he didn't order us out. You came, he said. I came because family still means something to me, I answered. We sat across from each other for almost an hour. He didn't apologize outright, but he asked questions about my job, my life in California, even how Gabriel and I had met. When I described the youth center where we volunteered, teaching kids that being gay didn't mean being alone, something in his expression softened. Before we left, he handed me an envelope. For the center, he said gruffly. Inside was a check for $50,000. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. On the drive back, Gabriel reached over and laced our fingers together on the gear shift. You did good today, he said. I did it for us, I replied. For the future we're building. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing Brooklyn in soft snow. Gabriel and I spent weekends exploring holiday markets, buying silly ornaments for our tiny tree. One Saturday we visited the youth center where we had first connected. The kids greeted us like old friends, asking Gabriel to sketch their portraits and me to help with college applications. Watching him patiently explain color theory to a shy 15-year-old boy who had just come out to his parents reminded me why I had fallen in love with him. Back at the apartment that night, I found Gabriel in the kitchen making hot chocolate. "I've been thinking," he said, handing me a mug. "What if we made this official? Not just living together. A wedding. Small, on the beach in California. Our friends, my family. No billionaires, no drama." My heart swelled so fast I almost dropped the mug. "Yes," I said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. We kissed over the steam of chocolate, laughing when our noses bumped. For the first time since the plaza, the future felt bright and entirely ours. We started planning quietly. A simple ceremony at Baker Beach, strings of lights in the trees, vows we would write ourselves. Gabriel designed the invitations on his laptop, delicate line drawings of two men walking hand in hand toward the ocean. I told my closest colleagues at the firm and watched their genuine smiles. Life was moving forward. Then the call came. My father's assistant again. "He's in the hospital. Another episode. He's asking for you." I flew to New York alone this time. Gabriel had a major deadline. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. My father looked frail in the bed, monitors beeping steadily. "Owen," he rasped. "I was wrong. Not about the business, about you. About what matters." Tears slipped down his cheeks, the first I had ever seen. "I don't want to die without knowing my son." I sat beside him and took his hand. It was thinner than I remembered, but the grip was still strong. We talked for hours about my mother who had died when I was 12, about the pressure he had felt to be perfect, about the fear that had made him push me away. When I showed him a photo of Gabriel on my phone, he studied it for a long time. "He looks like a good man," he said finally. "Bring him next time." I left the hospital lighter than I had felt in years. On the plane home, I wrote the first draft of my wedding vows, promising Gabriel the honesty my father and I had finally found. Spring brought new challenges. Gabriel's mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer, and we flew to Seattle to help. Watching him care for her with such patience and love deepened my respect for the man I was going to marry. Meanwhile, my father's health stabilized enough for him to attend board meetings again. He started sending me monthly emails, awkward at first, then warmer, sharing articles about LGBTQ rights in tech. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. One evening in our Brooklyn kitchen, Gabriel and I were addressing wedding invitations when my phone rang. It was Elena, my father's wife. Her voice was tight. "Owen, Richard collapsed again. The doctors say it's serious this time. He wants you and Gabriel here. Both of you." We caught the next red eye. At the hospital, my father looked smaller than ever. He gestured for us to sit. "I've changed my will," he said without preamble. "You're back in it, Owen. And I've set up a foundation for LGBTQ youth in your mother's name. I want you to run it." Tears burned my eyes. Gabriel rested a hand on my knee. "Dad," I managed. "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted. "I wasted too many years being afraid of what people would think. I won't waste the ones I have left." We stayed for 2 weeks, helping with his recovery. Gabriel charmed the nurses and even convinced my father to try a sketchpad for physical therapy. One afternoon, while my father napped, Gabriel and I walked the hospital garden. "This is healing," he said quietly. "Not just for him. For all of us." Summer arrived with perfect blue skies over Baker Beach. String lights twinkled in the cypress trees as our small group of 30 gathered on the sand. My father sat in the front row beside Elena, a blanket over his legs, looking proud for the first time in a decade. Gabriel's entire family filled the other side, cheering when we walked down the aisle together. I spoke my vows first, voice steady. "Gabriel, you taught me that love isn't something to hide. You stood beside me when the world tried to pull us apart, and you showed me the strength in being exactly who I am. Today I promise to keep choosing us, every single day." Gabriel's eyes shone as he answered, Owen, you walked into my life carrying 10 years of pain and turned it into purpose. I promise to keep reminding you that you are enough, more than enough, and that our love is the greatest legacy we'll ever build. We exchanged rings under a sky turning pink at sunset. When we kissed, the cheers rose around us, and I caught my father wiping his eyes. Later, as we danced barefoot on the sand, he pulled me aside. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said. "But I'm here now, and I'm proud of the man you've become." Gabriel joined us, and for the first time the three of us stood together without shadows. The night ended with laughter and sparklers, the Pacific waves singing our new beginning. Looking back at the long road from that shocking moment in the Plaza Ballroom to this perfect evening, I understood that every painful step had led here, to honesty, to family redefined, to a love that refused to stay hidden. True or false? A single act of courage at the worst possible moment can heal wounds that silence created over decades?